surprised with Karen. Were you? I just, for some reason, I thought they were gonna have more, witnesses.
Oh, your standard is what your standard is. What did you have for lunch today?
I had, and tonight I'll have carrots and salad
What are we doing?
and sugar-free pudding.
What are you doing?
Just trying to lose weight.
Well, that's gonna work, if you do that.
Oh, it'll work great.
Are you, is it what you did before?
Well, plus what I'm doing now, and you know, what I had to do before was cut my liquid intake to 60. That's like a 2, but that's it. But I can, what's that?
You don't have any protein?
You know what, I take enough pills that I'm sure they're loaded with it.
When did you start this?
2 weeks.
Wow. Would you do that? Would you eat apple? I think I could eat.
I would be hangry.
I probably would eat too, like, yeah. You know what? I remember I was on this diet where you eat apple before every meal, and the apple just is so filled with fiber, you can't eat a meal.
For my liquid stuff, if I eat a popsicle, I have to count that. If I eat anything that will turn into water, I have to count that.
That's how it works. I bet Carolyn's on you.
Oh, yeah.
So Marianne and I, well, not Marianne and I asked Marianne because I'm trying to decide. When we schedule stuff at 1 o'clock, do I not say it out loud? Like, does it sound different to other people?
Usually prosecutors. Oh, she's here.
Oh, I like that. Is it a flower?
Oh, yes. Yes.
What is the meat with that?
Brooch?
Roach?
Brooch.
Roach.
I was like, first I was like, what are you talking about?
Sorry, it took me a second to remember. Yeah, what it was called. But I really like that. I haven't seen one of those.
Thank you. I have a drawer full of things and I change them out. This is just the biggest one.
Okay. No, not yet. Hello, good morning or good afternoon.
So 1 o'clock really doesn't mean 1 o'clock. And you're here. I'd much rather Van Buren be on the road doing police type stuff, but no, they can sit in the hallway and wait for defense counsel to decide that.
Probably, she's gonna be playing something out for hard drive. She need a does she need a USB for that, or is it like remote, or?
She can play it through Zoom because Zoom is up.
Oh,
If you want to, HDMI cable it in, we can do that as well.
Okay. Do you think it was a 38-minute one?
38 minutes.
Oh, no. I actually may not even need to play it, just honestly. It's gonna time down.
So someone said, well, why did you stop streaming this morning? I said, well, if you were listening, you would have heard why we stopped streaming.
He did a good job. That little boy did a really good job.
Have you ever been a witness in a case?
No. Well, I love it. And you?
No.
But don't you think you could fix that?
I think anyone who comes in this room and answers the questions to the best of their ability does a good job.
He's 11.
Because even when you practice, I think there's something about sitting here that all eyes on you. Most people just aren't accustomed to that, and it's a lot.
Yeah.
And I notice there are some people who just look at me. They don't even look at the attorneys when they're asking questions. And I understand it's a lot, and this is a big room. And yeah.
Went crazy when we went back in the cell.
Cause that kid blind, that kid blind.
No kidding.
I knew he was probably go crazy, I had that feeling.
We're putting tears out.
So this will Lynetta.
Ready? Oh, you wait.
Good afternoon. We will be. Mr. Riggins, I don't know that we've had a couple of cases. I don't know that we've met in person. I have a time issue.
And I understand.
Okay, no worries.
I just want to.
I understand, but what happens here is that they know that I start within 15 minutes of the scheduled start time. Because officers, we had a case this morning, they might not have their lunch. We have people in off the road. As long as we're all on the same page, it's fine. No need to apologize. Hear an attorney say it's my fault's enough for me. And I do feel like they turned the heat on somewhere. I felt, because that back hallway feels really hot.
Yes, when it is a kind of.
No, it's just my notes. It's okay.
So there was even this kid driving this 100-year-old tractor rifling. He had bags of potato chips. Everybody else was throwing candy, but he's driving this old tractor, young kid, like 17, 18, 19 maybe, throwing bags of chips out into the crowd. Chips. Everybody else had candy. There was somebody who was driving themselves and they couldn't throw the candy and drive, so they kept stopping to throw candy. You can't do it by yourself. You need, because I've been the driver and I've been the thrower. I prefer to be the driver. You can't do it effectively. You can do it, you just can't do it effectively. So I told the glass lady about the metal thing. I described it to her. She said, "Oh, that's cute. You have the same crisp picture." The glass. I don't know. They use an old City of Detroit hubcap and they press glass on it and they sell just the arch that says Detroit. It's super cool. I can't figure out where to put it. I don't know. When he made the turkey leg, it had to be this big. It looked like a real turkey leg. Yeah. What else did they do that I liked? He made a crown of thorns. It looked like actual thorns into a crown shape. It was beautiful. This is 220569 FY, State of Michigan versus Carl Emerson Travis. May I have your appearances, please?
Good afternoon, Your Honor. Sonam Obstructing on behalf of the people, P83923.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. Good afternoon to your staff. Neighborhood Defender Services by Ken Riggin, P82125. Captors Carl Travis, stand with me to my right.
Mr. Travis, state your name for me, please.
Emerson Travis.
Thank you. Today is the day and time set for the live preliminary examination in this matter. There is count 1, unlawful imprisonment, count 2, police officer fleeing second degree, count 3, police officer assaulting, resisting, obstructing, count 4, police officer assaulting, resisting, obstructing. There is a domestic violence misdemeanor that travels along with it and a reckless driving misdemeanor that travels along with it. Are the people ready to proceed this afternoon?
Yes, Judge, the people are ready to proceed.
Defense ready to proceed? Any preliminary matters?
Yes, Judge, we do not have our complainant present, Dominique Ragland, and therefore the people will be moving to remove count 1, the unlawful imprisonment. And then even though the misdemeanor domestic violence does carry, seeing as this case is going to be a case without a complainant, we would request that count 5 also be dismissed. And so if this case does get bound over, then it would be a domestic violence case and it would be transferred over to the general warrants unit or general trials division, which is probably unrelated to this matter, but just to let you know that the 2 domestic charges are going to be removed moving forward.
Your response, Mr. Riggins?
This has no objection.
Thank you. Any other preliminary matters?
No, Judge.
Any preliminary matters, Mr. Riggins? Absolutely. Oh. The weather was nice and we walked down the street and went to the part in downtown New Boston. And so when the parade started, we just walked back to the main street and we were just standing across from McNasty's, just randomly on a corner. He and I are both waving. We see people we know that are on floats and stuff. They're screaming. We're screaming back and forth. We had a good time. They did a good job. And there was cheerleaders, even little kid cheerleaders. They were so cute. Romulus High School marching band was there. Thank you, sir. Your first witness, ma'am.
Yes, and Judge, I have another preliminary matter. The defense counsel and I have spoken for count 2, the fleeing second degree. We have stipulated to the prior convictions of the fleeing and eluding. I do also have copies that I shared with defense counsel for the certified copies of the prior convictions of Mr. Travis's prior convictions of fleeing and eluding.
The 3 priors from Washington, Oakland, and Calhoun.
Correct.
Okay,
That is correct.
thank you.
The people call Officer King as the first witness.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, Judge.
State your first and last name and then spell them for the record, please.
Mark King, K-I-N-G,
First name.
M-A-R-K.
Raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm testimony you give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you much. Please come up here and have a seat in this black chair that's closest to me. Ms. Moisezian, before you ask any questions, Mr. Riggins, I typically make a note in the file. I don't see a note to myself that I disclosed to you on the record that I'm married to an elected official in Van Buren Township. I make this disclosure because Van Buren Township is the issuing agency. My husband would have no idea about this case, about Mr. Trappist or any of the facts of this case. He wouldn't know that it was scheduled today. He's not involved in the day-to-day operations of the public safety. Like I said, I typically make a little notation in the file that I made that disclosure, and I don't see it. And I don't see you frequently enough to know whether or not you've heard me say that before.
I have not, Your Honor, if I might have a moment.
Yes, sir. I make myself that note. I don't see it. I know, but I make it's just, I put BBT in a circle or something around it, but I don't see it.
Your Honor, we're fine.
Thank you. Your question, ma'am.
Thank you. Officer King, where are you currently employed?
Van Buren Township Police Department,
And how long have you been employed with the department?
about 8.5 years.
And what is your position with the police department?
I'm a police officer assigned to the midnight shift.
As a, I guess what role with, as a police officer?
I answer calls for, I'm basically a zone car, so I answer calls for service, enforce traffic laws and enforce criminal statutes of the state of Michigan in Van Buren Township.
And have you been doing that for the entire 8.5 years you've been with the Van Buren Police Department?
Yes, ma'am.
You said you usually work the midnight shift. What hours does that consist of?
6P to 6A.
And were you working in that capacity on August 5th, 2022?
This incident occurred, I believe, August 5th, I was.
And when you work patrol, what vehicle do you usually drive?
Fully marked squad car, it's a Ford Interceptor SUV, it's gonna explore platform with overhead lights, full markings, everything.
Okay. And do you wear a uniform?
I do,
And what is your uniform consist of?
standard issue Class B, the pants I'm wearing today, the shirt I'm wearing today with the outside vest, badge, patches, all that type of stuff.
Okay, and do you have a body cam on your vest?
I do.
Okay. And were you in a fully marked patrol vehicle in your uniform on August 5th, 2022?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you have an occasion to respond to a police call at 48440 Denton Road in Van Buren Township?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you remember the nature of that police call?
It was a kidnapping in progress.
Do you recall what time of day that happened?
It was 9:09 p.m.
And did you respond to that address alone?
No, I had a backup officer coming from a distance away. I was in the complex when the call came out, so the first responding officer.
Okay. But no one else was with you in that vehicle?
No, ma'am.
And what happened when you arrived at that location?
I observed the victim's vehicle, which is a maroon Dodge, parked in the parking lot with its lights on.
Thank you.
I have no objection if you want to identify.
Objection sustained. Rephrase your question.
So what happened when you arrived at that location?
I observed the vehicle involved parked in the parking lot with its lights on. There's obvious physical confrontation taking place inside of the vehicle. I pulled up behind it, activated my emergency lights and spotlighted the patrol unit and exited the patrol vehicle. At that point in time, a female exited the vehicle yelling that the subject in the driver's side was attempting to kill her. And at that point in time, Mr. Travis exited the driver's side of the vehicle and began running.
Okay. And so when you say Mr. Travis, do you see that individual in the courtroom today?
I do.
Can you please identify where he is sitting?
He's in the green Wayne County prisoner outfit to my left.
Okay. May the record reflect that the witness has identified the defendant as Mr. Carl Travis.
Yes, ma'am.
So when you said that you saw him, you saw the male individual step out of the vehicle and run, can you describe what you did as a result?
As I made my approach to the vehicle, he stepped out. He started running back towards building 33, which is the instant location of the Waverly. I ordered him to stop. I called out to him several times, sir, stop. Identified myself as a police officer. He looked back at me and started running towards building 33, and then started running back towards the apartment complex, made an about face and started running south across the parking lot.
I'm sorry, can you say that last part again?
All right, so he ran towards building 33 first, made a left turn, turned around, and started coming back south towards building 35, which is across the parking lot.
I see, okay, and what was he going towards?
He's going towards a red Kia Sportage. But he's weaving through vehicles as he did it, things like that.
Okay, and were you following him this entire time?
Yeah, I was running after him.
Okay, and what sort of, I know you mentioned a few, but what sort of commands were you giving him during that
So
time?
telling him to stop and things like that. At that point in time, he entered the red Kia Sportage in the parking lot. At that point in time, I did not know that it was the vehicle he arrived in. I just thought he jumped into a random vehicle, so I went around to the driver's side of the red Kia Sportage, attempted to open the door, and he had the door locked.
Okay, and so during that interaction, with the male, did he comply with your commands at any point?
Not at all.
Okay, and then when you tried to open the door and it was locked, what happened afterwards?
I ordered him to open the door, and it's getting into the process to where I was gonna break the window and extricate him from the vehicle. That's when he took off in the vehicle.
And at that point, did you take off after him or did you remain on the scene?
I remained on scene, secured the scene for evidence, interview of victims and witnesses and things like that. And tracked his path. Basically made a right-hand turn out of the parking spot, another right-hand turn out of the parking lot towards Denton Road. He continued northbound on Denton Road to where Officer Mulberry intercepted him on Denton Road because he was coming into the call as a secondary officer.
Okay, and so did you share any of that information through your radio to other officers that were responding?
Yes, ma'am. I was calling out all that happened.
Okay, and did you share the type of vehicle that the male individual had left the scene with?
I did.
And
I
you
did.
said that was a red Kia Sportage?
Yeah, it
Okay.
was wearing a personalized plate. It basically said Queen for you, Queen Union, Edward Nor for Union was the actual plate. So I called out that plate also, as well as his direction of travel and who was driving the vehicle once I found out from the victim who he was.
Okay. And you mentioned when you first pulled in, what led you to believe that this individual or this car was related to the call that you received? What did you observe? Without saying what anyone said, what were your observations that led you to follow the male individual?
Dispatch gave a clear description of a maroon Dodge Durango in the parking lot that the female was drug into. Where the kidnapping was occurring. And like I said, I was right around the corner. I was in the complex when the call came out. So I rounded the corner, the Dodge Durango was sitting there. It was very clear from the way that the vehicle was shaking back and forth and the motions of the driver towards the passenger in the vehicle that a physical confrontation was taking place at that point in time. So I narrowed it. It was the only maroon Dodge Durango in the parking lot at that point in time.
Okay.
So it was very clear.
Okay. I have no further questions for this witness. Thank you.
Mr. Riggins, your witness.
Good afternoon, sir.
I have a few questions for you. So you said that you were on location at the time this occurred, correct?
I was in the complex.
All right. So it only took you a couple of moments to arrive at the scene, correct?
That's correct.
And what you saw was a red Durango, correct?
It was maroon, sir.
Maroon Durango, excuse me. And you said you saw the vehicle shaking,
Yes, sir.
correct? And that indicated something was happening, correct?
Correct.
You don't know what was happening in that vehicle, correct?
It appeared to be a physical confrontation, sir.
You don't know who initiated anything in the vehicle, correct?
At that point in time, I did not have complete information. That's correct.
Okay, so for all you know that there was an argument that may have gotten physical, correct?
I was dispatched to a kidnapping in progress, sir.
Okay.
And our dispatchers are very good at obtaining the information via phone from the victims and witnesses present.
Okay, and it was dark out at that time, correct?
No, sir. It was August, so it's still light. It was just getting to be dusk
It
at that
was.
point in time.
Dusk. Correct.
Correct.
So you could see, but it was getting dark. Correct, you said it was like 8:50 at night?
No, it's 9:09, sir.
9:09,
And like I said, there's still daylight.
okay.
The sun had not set yet.
And there was yelling going on, correct?
I couldn't hear anything outside, but once the victim exited the vehicle yelling, "He's trying to kill me," yeah, there was yelling.
The other party, perhaps?
Yes, yes, sir.
Not the victim, other party?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and there was yelling, correct?
Once the other party
Yes.
exited the vehicle, yes.
And there was a lot of confusion going on, correct?
It wasn't an overly chaotic scene. I've been on once.
Okay. And my client didn't actually run, did he?
Yeah, he did.
He actually walked away, correct?
Well, at first he started walking away, and then when I started pursuing him, he started running. Yes,
You saw him run.
I did.
And he got into a vehicle. And, correct?
He got into a red Kia Sportage.
And he drove off, correct?
Yes, sir.
Nothing further.
Thank you. Any redirect, ma'am?
No, that is it. Thank you.
Thank you. Officer King, you may step down. Thank you for your testimony.
Judge, the people next call Officer Mowbray.
You don't sound sure.
Mostly of the pronunciation of the last name, not of who I'm calling.
We'll figure that out in just a second. Good afternoon, sir. Would you state your first and last name and then spell them for the record, please?
Curtis Mowbray, Kurtismowbray.
And raise your right hand for me. Do you swear or affirm testimony you give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you much. Come up here, please. Have a seat in this black chair that's closest to me. My secretary is taking down your testimony. If for some reason she cannot hear you, I'll ask you to either raise your voice or pull that microphone closer, okay? Thank you.
Hello, can you pronounce and state your last name for me again?
Last name
Yes.
Mowbray, Mowbray.
And where are you currently employed?
Van Buren Township Police Department.
How long have you been employed with the police department?
5.5 years at Van Buren, 4 years at Roswell, New Mexico, so a total of 9.5 years law enforcement officer.
You said that was in New Mexico?
Yes.
And in Van Buren Township, what is your role as a police officer?
Patrol division, so responding to calls, assisting in traffic crashes, civil matters.
Do you have a specific shift that you work on?
Yes, night shift,
Night shift, and what time does the night shift consist of?
6 p.m. to 6 a.m.
During your time, your 5.5 years with the Van Buren Police Department, have you always been in the patrol division?
Yes,
Were you working in that capacity on August 5th, 2022?
yes.
When you work patrol, what kind of vehicle do you drive?
A fully marked patrol unit with Van Buren police on the side, fully marked, audible siren, emergency overhead lights.
Do you wear a uniform?
Yes,
And what kind of uniform is that?
Class B uniform,
What does that mean? I'm sorry.
which consists of displayed badge, displayed Van Buren police patches on either side of my arm.
Do you also have a body cam?
Yes,
And were you in a fully marked patrol vehicle in uniform on August 5th?
yes,
Do you know if your body cam was active that day?
It was.
And did you have an occasion to respond to a call near Denton Road in Van Buren Township?
Yes.
Can you describe the nature of the police call that you were responding to?
Kidnapping in progress.
Did you actually make it to the address or the location of where the call was sent from?
No.
And why is that?
I was advised by Officer King via radio, he was already on scene, that the suspect in question actually had fled the scene in a maroon Kia Sportage. A subject was later identified as Carl Travis.
Okay, and so at some point, did you encounter the car that was radioed into you?
Yes.
And when or where did you encounter that car?
Officer King advised the maroon Kia Sportage was going northbound on Denton Road. At that time, I was on South I-94 Service Drive, turning left southbound onto Denton Road.
Okay,
In which, upon turning, I observed the suspect vehicle in question traveling northbound at a high rate of speed.
okay, were you aware of what the license plate was at the time?
Yes.
Were you able to confirm that it was in fact that same car and not just like any other Kia Sportage?
Yes.
Okay, and how were you able to do that?
As the vehicle drove by me, immediately turned around, turned on my emergency overhead lights, audible siren, got behind the vehicle, and was able to verify the registration plate as the registration plate Officer King had advised over the radio.
Okay. So at that point, when you turned on your emergency lights and siren, what, if anything, did the car that you were following do?
The vehicle was still traveling northbound at Denton Road. As I turned around, I observed the vehicle, Carl Travis as driver, failed to make a complete stop at the closest stop sign at Denton South I-94 Service Drive. He then turned eastbound onto South I-94 Service Drive, which I too then turned eastbound on South I-94 Service Drive and followed after him.
Okay, and so how long did you follow him for?
In total, it was approximately 19 minutes, covering approximately 26 miles. And during that time, my emergency overhead lights were activated along with my audible siren.
Okay, the entire time?
The entire time.
Okay. And what was going on when you were pursuing him for those 19 minutes? Can you describe what you were observing of the driving of that vehicle?
Yes. During this time, I also observed Carl Travis to fail to stop at a red signal at South I-94 Service Drive and Belleville Road. And upon going through the red signal, I too went through the red signal, pursuing after him. We then got onto eastbound I-94 for that. During that time, I observed Carl Travis to drive his speeds over, on average, 110 miles per hour, reaching speeds up to 129 miles per hour through both medium and heavy traffic. I observed Carl Travis failed to use his signal, failed to maintain lanes, thus cutting off other motorists, pushing them on the shoulders of the road, almost causing them to crash into other vehicles. I observed him to drive in such a reckless manner that showed no due care, regard, caution, anything, or for other motorists' safety.
And so during that time, during those 26 miles, at any point, did you lose contact with that driver, or were you always behind him?
I always had visual contact. I may have been next to him on the side of him, but from the beginning of the pursuit to the end of the vehicle pursuit include the end of the foot pursuit, I did not lose visual contact with the vehicle and or Carl Travis.
Okay. You mentioned high rates of speed. How were you able to verify how fast he was driving?
Pacing him with my vehicle.
Okay. And how did the chase eventually end? I'm assuming it ended, and so how did that end?
Carl Travis exited off of eastbound I-94, I believe on 214B onto Trumbull Avenue. During this time, he also ran the red signal at that intersection. Upon going through the intersection, he ran over a concrete median, causing him to lose control of the vehicle and ultimately crashing into what I believe was like a metal pole, leaving the vehicle partially suspended.
Okay. And when that vehicle crashed, I'm sorry to be so redundant, but what was the vehicle that crashed, if you can describe that one?
It was the maroon Kia Sportage that I was pursuing the entire duration of the pursuit.
Okay. And then at the time when that vehicle crashed, did anyone exit that vehicle?
Yes. Once the vehicle crashed, I immediately exited my vehicle, which I observed Carl Travis exit the driver's seat, which I advise, I believe, 2 times, either put your hands up or get your hands up.
Okay. And at that point, were you aware of, whether the person that you were pursuing was armed in any way?
Officer King advised that Carl Travis may have possessed a firearm during the time.
And did that affect your pursuit of him in any way?
Yes, it did.
And how did it do that?
With that, I pursued after Carl Travis, giving multiple commands to stop, which he refused to stop, continued running. I left a reactionary gap, and instead of going hands-on, using physical force immediately, I decided to use my department-issued taser in an attempt to subdue him. I removed my taser, again, advised him to stop. He refused to stop, deployed my department-issued taser, which I heard Carl Travis scream, however, continue running, meaning the taser had negative effect. At that moment, my only other option was to continue to pursue after him, in which I eventually tackled him and took him to the ground.
Okay. Do you know, so I'm sorry, I think I may have skipped a step. So when the individual Carl Travis gets out of the vehicle, what direction is he running towards?
I believe he ran technically north around the front of his vehicle and then eastbound, in which I ran, I believe, between our vehicles and then also eastbound after him.
Okay, and what was the area like that he was running through?
In open area, parking lot, some type of sporting fields around.
Okay, and at this time, or I should say, what time was it roughly, either when you initially started pursuing him and then when the car crashed?
I believe the call came out at approximately 9:09 p.m.
Okay,
I figure 19 minutes after, around, we'll say 9:30ish
okay.
p.m.
Was it dark outside at that point at 9:30 p.m.?
Yes, it was dark outside. However, during the beginning of the foot pursuit, for I'd say 3/4 of it, we were in a lit area.
While you were following or chasing after this male individual, were you giving any other commands during that time?
I believe I just continued to say stop and possibly I'm going to tase you.
Okay. And at any point during that chase, did he comply with your commands to stop?
No,
I'm sorry, did you say you released your taser once or twice?
just one.
Just once? And then, so the second time was when you tackled him, that's how you were able to get him to stop?
Yes.
Okay. Was anyone else there at that point?
No.
And did any officers respond to the scene to assist you?
Yes, numerous.
Okay. Do you know roughly how long you pursued him on foot?
I don't.
Okay.
If I had to say, I would say probably less than a minute.
Okay. One moment, please.
Yes, ma'am.
I have no other questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Riggins.
Mulberry.
Mulberry, I'm sorry. Just briefly, you identified my client as Mr. Travis, correct?
Yes.
Because that's what somebody told you his name was, correct?
Yes.
But you didn't know who he was, correct?
At the time,
Right.
no.
And when you were chasing him, you didn't know who he was, correct?
Personally, no, just what I was advised.
Okay, and you did not see him when he left the apartment complex and entered the car, correct?
No, I did not.
So you were chasing the car itself, but you didn't know what individual was in the car, correct?
Yes.
Yes,
I was chasing
you were chasing the
the
vehicle.
vehicle.
So this could have in fact been someone else other than who originally got in the car, correct?
Yes.
So you followed this vehicle
onto I-94, correct?
Yes,
And the vehicle ultimately ended up on 94 in Trumbull, correct?
yes,
All right. And at that point, an individual got out the car and ran, correct?
yes,
And you gave chase to that, individual, correct?
yes,
And you yelled, stop, stop, correct?
yes,
Stop or I'll tase you, correct?
something to that effect.
And the individual turned around and saw you, right?
I believe he looked over his shoulder several times.
And it was dark when you were
Not during that time, no.
when you were
that-
running, it was dark.
During the time that he actually turned and looked at me, we were in a lit area. It wasn't until after I deployed my taser to where we ran into an unlit area where I then tackled.
And while you were running, you never yelled the word police, correct?
I don't recall, no.
You just said stop,
Yes,
all right? And this individual just kept running.
yes,
And ultimately, you tased him. And then you tackled him, correct?
yes.
And you were wearing body cam footage, correct? I'm sorry, body cam, correct?
Will you repeat that? I didn't hear.
You were wearing a
Yes.
body cam, correct?
Yes,
And that body cam was activated, right?
yes.
At some point during the tackle, what happened to the body cam?
It got knocked off my vest.
Do you know how it got knocked off?
No idea. Other than if we were wrestling, that's how it got knocked off.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Thank you. Ms. Morsizian.
Yeah, sorry, just a couple. When you eventually were able to, I guess, tackle the individual that you had been chasing for that extended period of time, were you able to identify who that person was?
Yes, after he was detained.
Yes, sorry, after he was detained. Okay, and you've been referring to an individual, but what was that person's name when you were able to identify who he was?
Carl Travis.
Okay, and the person that you detained, were you able to see what he looked like? Did you get a good look of him?
Yes.
Okay.
Via his, are you referencing how I was able to identify him? Get a look or?
No, like
After he's
physically
already-
after he was already detained,
Oh,
did you
yes.
actually see what he
Yes.
looked like? Okay, and do you see that person in the courtroom today?
Yes, I do.
Okay, and can you identify where he's sitting?
He's wearing the green jumpsuit, has the face mask on.
Okay. And that was the same individual that throughout the entirety of your pursuit was in that vehicle that you were pursuing?
Yes,
Okay. And Judge, for the record, may the record reflect that the witness has identified the defendant as Carl Travis.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Did that generate any additional questions, sir?
No.
Thank you. Officer, thank you for your testimony. You may step down.
Thank
Your next witness, ma'am.
Judge, the people have no other witnesses.
Any witnesses, Mr. Riggins?
No.
Thank you. Argument, ma'am.
One moment, please. Judge, I believe the people, for purposes of preliminary exam, have met our burden for establishing count to the fleeing second degree from a police officer, in that the requirements are that that an officer was in uniform and performing his lawful duties, which would have been Officer Mowbray, and his vehicle was adequately marked as a law enforcement vehicle, which he testified to that he was in a fully marked patrol vehicle with audible siren and light, and that in fact the siren and the lights were activated during the entirety of the pursuit, that the defendant was in fact driving a motor vehicle, and that the officer ordered that defendant to stop that vehicle through various indications, including the sirens, the lights, which just out of, I guess, traffic laws would require that someone stop when they see those signals, in addition to the signals that were given, or the orders that were given by the officer when they exited the vehicles and were on a foot pursuit. And lastly, that defendant knew of that order, meaning that his actions indicated that he was aware that he was being chased. I mean, the chase or the pursuit went on for 26 miles, 19 minutes. There's no reason to believe that the driver of that vehicle, being Carl Travis, was not aware that he was being requested to pull over. There's no indication that at any point it was a mistake that the lights were on behind an individual that didn't need to pull over, anything like that. And he in fact did fail to, or refuse to obey those commands that were given of him. And lastly, that he has one or more of the prior convictions for first, second, or third degree, which was already stipulated to by counsel. And so therefore, we believe that we have met the burden and the elements for the fleeing and eluding charge. And then for counts, it would be 3 and 4, assaulting, resisting, obstructing arrest from a police officer. The testimony was given by Officer King that he initially responded to the scene for a call. And when he arrived on scene, he was in a fully marked patrol vehicle and in uniform, that he had indicated to the individual that he thought was the suspect to stop. He, I think in his testimony, stated that he told the person to stop multiple times, and that he identified himself as police, even though his uniform and the car also identified himself as police, and that he requested that the suspect stop, and that person did in fact disobey those commands, got into a vehicle. The officer testified to asking the person to get out of that vehicle. He did not, and then drove away, and all of that was radioed to the second officer who was responding on scene. And for that officer, Officer Mowbray, that he again disobeyed any commands given for the entirety of those 26 miles, 19 minutes, in addition to the foot pursuit, where I don't believe it's necessary for at that point the officer to have identified himself as a police officer. Clearly, he got out of the his patrol call, was in uniform, was indicating to the suspect to stop. Carl Travis refused to stop, and was even tased and then tackled to the floor because of his consistent and repetitive failure to stop at all of the commands that were given of him. And lastly, the reckless charge. I mean, even though the facts definitely establish that as well, it is a misdemeanor, and that would just carry on with the other 3 felonies. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, we had testimony first from Officer King that he came onto the scene of what would best be considered a argument. He wasn't sure what exactly was happening. He saw 2 people. He told one person got out, and there was a party that started to yell and scream. It was, the officer called it dusk. The video might have been darker. The point being, there was a lot of confusion going on, and my client decided that he didn't want to be around confusion. He walked away. I don't know I know it's a question of fact that somebody was saying, hey, stop. My client decided he didn't want to be around being accused of something that was just a misunderstanding. As far as the second officer, Officer Marbury, testified that my client turned around and looked his direction, but he didn't say he looked at him. He was running. It was dark. He yelled, hey, stop. Didn't identify himself as a police officer. He just used the word, hey, stop, or I'm going to tase you. And I think common sense would say, if someone tells you I'm going to tase you, if I don't want to be tased, I'm going to continue to move. So I don't think that was a police officer error. I believe that he didn't satisfy the elements for police officer error. As to the police officer fleeing, I believe that it is a clear question of fact.
The people rest.
Thank you. This court has had the opportunity to listen to the testimony this afternoon of both Officer King and Officer Mowbray will find that the people have met their burden for exam purposes as to counts 2, 3, and 4, as previously indicated. Count 6 will travel along as a misdemeanor. The testimony from Officer King was that he was responding to a call. He made efforts to make contact with Mr. Travis. Mr. Travis did not stop or submit himself to Officer King. And with Officer Mowbray, the testimony was that he was in a fully marked police car in Class B uniform and had lights and audible siren during the entirety of a 26-mile, 19-minute attempt to engage Mr. Travis. The people have already previously indicated that counts 1 and count 5 are dismissed. So the bind over again will be the counts 2, 3, 4, and 6. The only other outstanding matter is that there was a request that this matter be referred to pretrial service. That request came at the first PCC on August the 17th. Mr. Riggins asked for an update on September 12th, and this morning the court was handed the report from pretrial services where the writer recommends that no action on the present bond of 500,000, 10% with GPS tether, no contact to the complainant. There be no change to that bond. That being the report from pretrial services. Mr. Travis' previously entered bond with any of its conditions will continue. The next step in these proceedings will be an arraignment on the information, which will be on October the 11th, 2022 at 9 a.m. at the Frank Murphy Hall of Justice. Is there anything else on behalf of the people?
No, that is it. Thank you, Your Honor.
Anything else on behalf of Mr. Travis?
Yes, Your Honor. I'd like to point out that two of the charges, the charge pertaining to the complaining witness in this case were dropped. So the complaining witness in this case now are police. I don't believe that any police officer has anything to fear from my client. Your Honor, I believe based off the charge that we have left, we have a police officer fleeing and we have police officer yard charge, a bond of $500,000, hopefully excessive. My client does have children. My client is employed. He has a construction company where he has worked for 19 years, if I'm not mistaken. Again, I do think that based off the charges that exist on this case now, that a $500,000 bond is excessive, which is actually for a reasonable bond.
What's reasonable in your eyes, Mr. Riggins?
Your Honor, in my eyes, maybe 50,000, 10%.
Ma'am,
Judge, the people would object to that. Of course, we are aware and understand that the count 1, which is the 15-year felony, was dismissed given the fact that the complainant did not appear. However, count 2 is still a 10-year maximum felony. The fact that the defendant has 3, actually, I think it's 4 prior convictions for fleeing and eluding, and these circumstances in this case still make him, I think, a danger to the community. In addition to a flight risk, if he fled from the police when he was, when they were just trying to question him about what was happening, the surety that the court would have that he would return for these court dates is not very high, I would say, just given the resisting arrest and the fleeing. Again, I think the danger to the community is there, the risk is there, especially because the pursuit went on for 26 miles where the officer's testimony was describing how reckless the defendant was driving and how that could have easily caused any of those motorists into an accident. Thankfully, that didn't happen, but that doesn't mean maybe the next, I don't know, 5th or 6th time that the defendant decides to flee the police, that something like that won't happen again. So even though the unlawful imprisonment charges reduce or removed. That doesn't mean that the count two isn't as significant of a charge and doesn't put the community at risk of the defendant doing that again. And so we would request that the bond remain the same, and then just to note that the defendant is a habitual fourth offender as well.
Anything else, Mr. Riggins? Mr. Riggins is correct. The report from pretrial services took into account the severity of the entirety of the 6 counts against him. Included in the report were comments that Mr. Travis has either, one sister said 8 or 9 children, someone else indicated 11 children, 3 of whom he's still responsible for the care of, that he is a self-employed person, so the longer he's in custody, the greater detriment that is to the family. 2 of Mr. Travis's sisters gave information to indicate that he had a place to be should he be able to post bond. The court will not reduce the bond amount to 50,000, but we'll do 100,000, 10% with the GPS tether as well. As indicated by the prosecutor, Mr. Travis does have fleeing convictions going back to 2000, the most recent one being 2013. So there is some concern about public safety. So other than that, was there anything else, Mr. Riggins?
No, Your Honor, thank you.
Thank you. Anything else, Ms. Moisezian?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes this matter for this afternoon. We'll get the paperwork done. This court will stand adjourned. Thank you.
Did you already state the AOID? I'm sorry.
I did. It is October 11th.
Okay.
They're closed on Monday because of the holiday.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you.
What's the holiday? What's the holiday?
Columbus Day, which was a big deal when I lived on the East Coast. It's not that big of a deal here